Welcome to your Inner Design podcast. Today I have the honor to invite and introduce Thomas Mueller, who is a globally renowned design leader and the Chief Design Officer at Accenture Song, where he oversees a large international creative team focused on human-centric innovation. Thomas and I are also both alumni of Art Center College of Design here in Pasadena, California. He was a 2024 Distinguished Alumni Award receiver. So I'm really happy to have Thomas have you here with me, along with the many titles and the global roles that you hold. I would love to ask you what has always been true about how you see the world on a basic human level.
Well, first of all, Rubina, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this exchange and the fact that we both come from the same, common cloth, common ground that shaped us as designers, which is sort of maybe a bridge into what shaped my view around design. If I go all the way back, I think a very core ingredient is how you grow up, in what environment you in a way get molded and have the freedoms to explore. And personally, I always say you know, when I look back, I'm very happy that I grew up in a very supportive, but also in a very humble environment where, however, exploration was encouraged. And early on, even though I'm a very sporty person, endurance sports, but that's for a different conversation. I started with curiosity. It was very much encouraged, and as a young child, going back to the 70s, long before digital, making with your hands or with tools of craft in that era was part of it. So art became kind of like a language of expression very early on. And then as I evolved, design wasn't really an abstract thing for me. It was the drawing, the painting, the sculpting, learning how form creates meaning and how meaning in context creates an environment for dialogue. And Art Center was definitely a defining moment for me in that. It wasn't just about education. It was very much, I often tell people, it's kind of like a modern monastery devoted entirely to practice, to rigor, and to learning. And then alongside, from there on, my career evolved alongside the digital industry's evolution, from very early web exploration at some of the earliest design studios in Digital Alley in New York, to nowadays having the opportunity to serve small clients, large clients, not-for-profits, large enterprises, and their entire systems and organizations. So to me, design leadership emerged much more, I would say, naturally as the scope of the problems grew, not because of a chase for roles or titles. I didn't leave design to become a leader. Leadership much more became the medium through which design can have real impact by orchestrating culture, by bringing people together where, you know, people create their best.
So I hear you. You're talking about, not just creating things, but what really drew you into design was the way of understanding people, making that path. And that's kind of like the leadership followed you in that sense, right? And I wonder, early in your career, was there something specific that you naturally noticed that maybe others didn't see or other people might have missed?
I would, that's a big question, and it would be,
Yeah.
you know, too much for me to say I was the one who saw this one thing. I think I grew up, I had the opportunity to study and then mature as a designer during a very special time, and many others before us and after us will go through their own special time. But it was a moment in time where culture, business, art, creativity, and technology all came together, and quite a few of us were fortunate and collectively exploring at that same time, which brought us through multiple technical revolutions, web, mobile, data. And every time the same question during those transformations came back to me and those of us who had, bonded together to push the medium, create human impact, and see how we could help businesses. And the question that we always kept coming back to was, there's a lot of things we can do, but what does it actually mean for people? Because the medium early on, the internet or digital, was much more unknown. And what it taught me early on was technology doesn't create meaning. It's actually people who provide context, people who enable the environment in which then meaning gets created. And then if you fast forward to now, well, it's the next technology revolution, AI, Gen AI, agentic ecosystems, super powerful tools. But, those tools ultimately inherit the values of those who wield those tools, and human-centered design or focus on the inherent potential in humans is in a way the red thread through it. Human-centered design will also have a huge responsibility to ensure that AI is understandable, that it's trustworthy, that it's accountable. And without that, and if we're only focusing on, oh, it's so fast, speed will replace judgment. And I would say efficiency will replace responsibility.
So you're telling us part of an organization maybe implementing AI and technology, what you sense in the room is maybe that, the human thing that no other system can replace, right? Or replicate. That sounds like in your experience, this is the focus. And I would love to hear, you said a few things about designing for trust. How does that look like besides, I think a lot of time design gets structured as strategy, and personally inner design and the philosophy and methodology is about more in the process and not so much focus on the outcome. Of course, the outcome will, bridge along with it, but staying with the process, staying in the creative process, staying with the design thinking part of it is really part of the methodology for us at Inner Design. But for you, with your experience, with, of course, many years I've watched you give the trend reports, and I feel very much that they speak to the same philosophy that I hold at Inner Design. So I would love to hear from your own voice, what is that felt experience of, designing for trust?
Mm. Um,
Or is it felt? Or is it something else for you?
yeah. I mean, let me pick up a few things. I think that you said. One, there's many people who are creating, who are participating right now. So each will come with their own values and with their own value framework. I think it's the world, it's society, it's the individual and the collective who will decide long after we're gone, what was the right path. Personally, I believe and I encourage an environment whereby, as long as humans are in the lead of technology, even incredibly sophisticated, deterministic, or independent, increasingly independent technology, um, our values need to be guiding where we go, because we are still decision makers who can be held accountable. So the more powerful the technology, the more intentional ultimately I believe we have to be about the human values behind them. Now that could get into a debate. Well, what's the right value system? What's the wrong value system? Well, in some societies, there are or every culture has its own then governance framework to decide what's right, what's not right, what's good, what's too much for the individual, what's too much for the collective. There's many different versions happening in parallel, right, around the world. So in the places where we can have impact, either on a large scale, or if we're just focused about what's the right thing I can offer through the act of design to those on the other side, well, it's something that, and this is now me speaking again from deep inside of me, if I give them something with which they can have moments of joy, have moments of evolving, getting smarter, learning, getting things done easier, faster, so it frees up their time for them again, getting back to, we're still humans and over there's machines. That's sort of like at the core of what we have to do, which then if I build the bridge maybe to trust, well, trust is, I would say, an important currency, what maybe the most important currency, similar to stability, when we are navigating not just this year, but always. Humanity has always navigated uncertain times, but it feels like we all are very aware since March 2020, we've navigated incredibly uncertain times. And I think people crave predictability. Yes, also serendipity, but predictability, trust, and institutions, things that get designed, or brands can play an anchor in that. People don't need brands, in my view, to be louder. They need them to be steadier. Designers cannot, creators cannot skip the process. And I would say, and that's also an evolution of mine, we have, there has been an era, which was about forming this part of the design industry, that where it was necessary to focus on the process, to establish new frameworks of bringing humanity, design, and technology together. And we need to move beyond obsession about the process, because we've internalized the process so well that we know when it's good, and we also see the signals maybe when we need to push it forward. But we need to focus on outcomes, because the world or business isn't going to get better if from the process. It's hopefully going to get better, make progress from what the process ultimately produces, so the outcomes.
So for you, you have this very clear set of values, like you said, and I'll call it kind of like an inner compass that leads you towards that. It sounds like for me. And then I did read, of course, the report this year and saw the parts on stability and, of course, the uncertain times. You're right. We probably always have needed stability right now. Maybe it's amplified because of the uncertainties out there. The report talks about how people, we all know, and we reach for our phones in the moment we wake up, open our eyes, and looking for what did we miss? And there's this pressure, this restlessness that people are looking for beyond that scroll. For me, I just wonder, or for you, I should say, what does a brand that functions as an anchor actually feel like to the people inside it? The employees, the designers, the leaders. Share that with us a little bit. What have you had to build inside of yourself first, and then bring it to the space that you work in to stay steady when culture is moving so fast, and it's hard to process how fast we're moving even.
Hmm. I would say both for myself and then for the organizations, the brands that we work for. It is about the output, but the output never is successful unless you also help yourself and then the people in an organization to go through their journey of change, which some describe as transformational moments. You're going through this transformation, you're going through that reinvention, or you could say you simply need to ensure that people get a sense that this is not uncertain, or it feels like they're going into a moment of uncertainty. So in that moment of uncertainty, they will seek signals of there's care, there's thoughtfulness. Even though
Yeah.
we're evolving, there's also intentional continuity in it. And there's a sense of reliability. So the organization focused on the inside, and then as a result of that, onto the outside, needs to come across as, a word that I like to use, as an anchor, where you see consistent behaviors, where you see communication that is consistent and honest, and where you are ultimately focused on building and prioritizing longer term relationships over short-term wins, because short-term wins means, right, it's this time, it's something else next time, which means it's inconsistent. And what you said yesterday, which came across as, that seems very honest, but if it's short-term wins and you're doing and you're behaving differently the next day, well, then the communication from the previous day doesn't really reflect that. So that consistent behavior, that honest, anchored again back to a value system, a North Star, the promise that the brand stands for needs to be communicated honestly if you're truly and genuinely in led by the purpose of, or in the business of, building long-term relationships over short-term wins. And those are then the brands, right, that stay with us, that become iconic, and people still refer to them, even though they may no longer be in the exact business that they originally started out. Or maybe the business doesn't exist anymore, and people still talk about, long gone businesses like a Blockbuster, which was right at its time, and it just didn't have the foresight to the next cultural wave. Well, it got replaced, and it still is a reference point and a marker in the evolution of industry and culture.
So I love the way you put that. I heard like intention, but intention must be anchored in that consistency in order to see the results really that you want. And I think that probably is like just across the board. If you look at anything that's going either in the right direction or maybe not so much in the correct direction. And I just feel like having something so simplified, really like as a methodology that you can follow and its structures, you really see this. I'm wondering, does this show up for you personally in a sense that, like, do you have any personal creative projects that has no agenda attached to it that you might be working on, or when was the last time and what was it like for you?
um,
Or is it all personal, Thomas? It's the drive and it's also
well,
personal, I'm sure.
the the set the separation, sort of like that line between what's private, what's public, well, that's fairly clear for me. But the line between what's where what drives me, has a personal output, versus what drives me has a commercial output, is much more blurry. The commercial output, working still in industry for the creative customer organization of a very large consulting and transformation partner, it can be very consuming. So the personal things that you do then also focus on, well, what else can I do to stay curious, to stay um healthy, centered, fresh, etc. Because, and I'm coming back to a point, I think the notion of, you know and I think it's also a theme that you and I have touched on in the past, joy, spontaneity, and a sense of always building a connection is important in any project, be it a personal project or a commercial project. You will be the outcome will speak to people's hearts, not only their minds. It's not what you told them, right? It's how you made them feel is what moves people, what remembers you. And if I go back through, you know, projects over the last 3 decades, over personal things, I think the best things always were the result when we explored without fear, when teams were super connected, when teams were super curious, because the environment was set up in a way where they were not just, okay, I got from 9 to 6, I got from 9 to midnight to just get something done. No, they were actually emotionally engaged because the environment was there, where ultimately joy, creativity, you know, was not mechanical. It was actually playful because there was safety, not fear. And it produced really good outcomes because either myself or a team, feels alive at work. And then the outcome or the innovation, I think, is much more, you know, performative than just, okay, we produced an outcome. There's play involved, both joyful and serious.
Yeah, I think that play, creative expression, these are fundamental basics that are human needs, basic human needs. And, it's important, I think, for people to hear that even on the grand scale of, large corporations like the ones, that you have for yourself and organizations, that's also a common thread that is also met and it's validated as a need. So can you share with us maybe like what does it actually look like on a random Tuesday when is there something specific or is it just overall the theme and the presence of that creative expression that's available there?
Let's pick a random Wednesday, and if I just reflect on the day today, it was a mix of um, starting actually with self, the big balance to what I still, what I love doing at work with teams and for clients and for brands is um, cycling, which is my form of self care. Early mornings, getting up, getting out of the house. For those in miles, I guess it would be getting an early 30, 40 miles in with a small group of either other cyclists or friends. Through that, I've become part of a ride leader for a global, very values driven cycling brand. Um, but that's how the day started, and then from there it went to, okay, here's 3 things that I picked out last week that are still on my reading list that I did block out some time for. So from take care of body through cycling to take care of mind through either reading or getting a digest from it. Then I had 2 quick creative sessions. One was about the new, one was about something in the works right now, if I may use that terminology. Um, by that time, it was around 10:30 in the morning. From there, I headed to the client's location, which is luckily only about 20 minutes away from where I live. Had two touch points with two different clients, one a business leader, one a product leader. And then we had a small team lunch with my client and her team members, and another colleague of mine joined us. Then we had another review session with them afterwards. Then I headed to our office, which is another 20 minutes into the other direction. And that wrapped up the team, less filled with more making, reflecting. It was, some aspect of business, some aspect of planning, some aspect of prioritizing. And then I said, I gotta flip my mind, because there's a wonderful session coming up this evening with Rubina on inner design. So I tried to keep it all contained, and here we are in my time zone, 8:30 at night.
Wow, I'm grateful for you to join us after such a full day. And I hear a lot of commuting, which happens for me because I'm in LA, but also the transition, the thread that flows between your personal drive, between the expression and the connection, I think is really valuable. I think people who are in, a seasoned chapter of their career, such as yourself, tend to sometimes be rewriting what it means to be vital and relevant. And I hear all of those things very much present. I'm wondering what has been or gotten maybe what has gotten more interesting to you as you've moved through different seasons of your work. What does a creative life look like from where you're standing in the day to day? But actually, you share that with us already, like in the trajectory of like as you go into these other seasons that you foresee for yourself.
Well, the seasons that are ahead of us are also a result of the seasons that are behind us. And if I would have ever thought, when I graduated from Art Center's grad program, that I would live several distinct professional lives ahead of me, um, it's not what I expected. And standing humble and lucky where I am today to get to work with challenging clients and with incredible colleagues, you know, 3 decades later, I'm certainly saying full of conviction and passion. I'm absolutely not done yet. And if I think back, but it also means sort of like forward, our careers are, or the careers that we can create, they're no longer linear. And the identity that we started with, maybe also as a gift to give to listeners, don't fixate on just that one thing. Identity, in my mind, is also absolutely not fixed. It will evolve. Your journey will evolve you, or you will shape it as you accept to move, from career to career, from professional life to professional life. That can mean, if you decide so, different different neighborhoods, different cities, maybe different continents, different disciplines, different industries. And eventually you find sort of like the place where hopefully you feel the most productive, the most satisfied, but also what comes out of it um, um, is leaving the world or the client better than when you or they found you in the first place. I think a design career um, definitely has to reflect the capability you bring, that you're willing to continuously evolve, the curiosity that hopefully stays as, eyes wide open and curious as you were born with, but also that there's intent to it, and it's not all defined by age bracket. You've sort of like left the 20s, you've left the 30s, you left the 30s, the 40s, you left the 50s. So you clearly should be this. Well, that's certainly not the sort of like mindset that I subscribe to. And I try to express that through the environments of how we work together with, and maybe the little gifts that I can pass on.
Thank you for touching on some of that. I had a question about your philosophy, like in leadership, is there an inner condition that you return to when decisions get genuinely hard, that to guide others, like you mentioned, a lot of designers who are entering this field, and I think maybe everybody feels blindsided because of technology, but I think it's also ever changing. Like you mentioned, it doesn't matter which decade we're in. We are at a definite evolution of that design of technology. So knowing what you know now about creative leadership and through your journey, is there some kind of a leading skill thought process that you had about
Mhm.
yourself and, that direction?
I would say if I would go back to three words that I had shared earlier: creativity, play, innovation, curiosity. But then at the same time, also, it applies to yourself on the smallest scale, and it applies to many if you work in a larger context or a larger system. What matters incredibly on a small and on a big scale, and it exponentially grows, is clarity. The clarity that you provide, the clarity that you create, and the clarity, I would say, that you also um, expect when you serve or lead thousands of creatives or designers. It's the way you condition the system or the principles we establish. It's You will utterly fail if you focused on micromanagement or the sort of like philosophy: nothing can leave the agency unless I've seen it and I've signed off. Um, it works in a one to a few context, and it usually never produces, I think, highly engaged, happy, productive people. But it doesn't scale beyond that. So it's about the system, it's about principles. The role, your creative responsibility expands to include setting direction that stems from clarity, removing friction that enables clarity, and protect what matters. So again, remove the fog, so we can protect what matters to work with and create clarity, I would say. And all of that goes back to maybe what we started with, being adaptable, coming from a few simple um, values, and showing up with a with an inclusive, with a listening mindset, not one that comes from control. One way I've recently put that is, good leadership doesn't actually simplify people; it simplifies the environment around them.
That is very clear. I think if I were to summarize from my reflection of what you're telling me, would it be fair to say designing consciously is, what it means for taking sustainably balanced and technological advances together, like just having the full picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you bring it
Yeah.
more to build on what you said, to maybe human qualities, then you could also phrase this as a design. It's not, you realize at some point that design wasn't just what I did, but it's much more how I thought. And if you then project that then onto the environments, onto the colleagues, onto the teams around you, I think that then lands there, because design is, of course, about creation, but the what comes out on the end, that act of creation, be it something invisible, that's a framework, be it something tangible, that's an object, be it something fluid, that's a digital service, is the result of ultimately an act of care for people, for systems, and for the future. Because you're making something that hopefully is for a long lasting relationship into the future, not a replication of the past. Because we brands, culture, we don't progress. We are stale, or we regress.
Yes, yes, yes. I think when inner design came into play, I found it that most people had a moment when that outer architecture of what life is, of success, and their inner experience of it stopped matching. Do you think that, and I'm not sure, like, have you had pivots? You know, you said we have all many chapters. Have you had pivots or have you ever had moments that have impacted you? Or what did it ask of you to make that alignment, to make sure you stayed in that alignment?
Well, I mean, the very human, honest answer is, and very, um, yeah, I mean, the very honest answer is those moments can happen daily. It's not like you have that, oh man, I'm devastated. What happened? I don't know where to go. Am I in the right place? Am I the right person? In micro moments, they happen. Okay, daily is an exaggeration, or it's a very good reflection how much you're in touch and with yourself and self-aware. But I would say they happen constantly. And if they don't happen, you're not self-aware, therefore you're not really aware of those around you. So having constant moments of doubt, of insecurity, yet being equipped with detecting them and knowing what to do, hopefully gives us the ability to kind of do the things that I've described in the last, where I tried to put into words in the last half hour that we've spoken. Um, I think it's daily. It's just how well we know ourselves, how well we have learned to not hide them, but I would say how to manage them and immediately extract, small amounts of recharge or bigger amounts of, this was completely wrong how I went about this. Well, let me try again and rephrase that. So it's sort of like that art of, I don't know, doing something, immediate reflection, and either let it be because it seemed right. You see it from the others around you, or again, having your senses and knowing how to adapt or maybe redirect. So I feel
So that
daily to be good daily. I don't know. Can I put it like that?
Yes, yes. I think this is a very strong design principle, if I could put it that way, of saying, this is the design process. This is the design thinking, and it's applied more to yourself, your life first, and everything that's happening as a human, like you mentioned, and then outwardly in all the things and all the manners that you have personally shown us, not just here today in our conversation, but I think in your journey from what people can see of your leadership and your work that's been out there in the world. So I appreciate you sharing that with everybody here. I know that this year's trends reports, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they have not yet been published. So I would love to give like maybe a little sneak preview. I know we talked about the overarching, but is there anything specific you wanted to share with our listeners, as you know, people out there maybe in the public haven't seen or heard yet?
Yeah. Um, we can share. So we've chosen as a firm, as Accenture Song and as Accenture, a different path of publicizing the report this year, um, guided, I would say, by words that I've chosen that I've used earlier, being extremely, intentional and focused ultimately on our clients, instead of using the same amount of energy of just, broadcasting it very broadly. I'll happily share. You can share the URL where people can find the report on our firm's website. But the overarching theme, deals with the human journeys that we live every day, we see every day, we observe every day, and we can influence for them to be either better, more fulfilling, more educational, more successful, more reflective, more inclusive, every day. I definitely see how it feels like the world has gone this way, that way, that way so many times in the last few years, and we've not lived through one crisis, but poly crises at the same time. Yet it feels like to me, or we observe that in a way, it also has been a fairly consistent, straight evolution where the need of providing the tools for those individual or collective human journeys to be, easier to remain in a balanced control over what we do, how the technological world around us gets better and better because how we influence it and how we create a balance there. So it has also a balanced positive impact on people, on communities, on the planet. I mean, you could say people, planet, profit is an old paradigm of three P's. I'll only choose three P's. I'll leave product and positioning out. But that's what we're guided by. And in that battle for that balance, we see people are looking for stability because they feel we experience of being whiplashed for probably the last 6 years. People are definitely concerned and need to have the support as their lives, their careers are being impacted faster and faster through AI and at the speed at which it can do things differently. People continue to intentionally, right? We saw it right after the pandemic, the forming of, new communities, people's exuberant urge to get out away from behind the screen back into communities and getting a sense of other sources of purpose. We call that trend good vibrations. And which is a great opportunity for designers, for creators, and for businesses. The reality that in many parts, sadly not in all parts of the world, but longevity and aging is a possibility more so than in many eras behind us. But what does that mean to maybe live as long after you've stopped working? If your life was maybe cut into three very predictable chapters: you're born, you raise, you educated, then you produce as part of a society, and then you are, I don't know, in the sunset or in another chapter. That last chapter that too often was too short is extending. So what potential is in that? Many people want to continue to work a lot more. Many people feel a responsibility to make sure that their knowledge isn't lost. It's either passed back to those behind them so they have a jump start and they can hopefully, you know, take care of all of the mistakes that we've done. These are some of the big themes in this year's report. Yesterday, me and a colleague presented that report tailored towards the financial services industry to a room of, I think we were 35 clients from about 12 different organizations in a room, and we were very pleased. They were intently listening, and um, the the amount of discussion it produced afterwards in terms of, wow, we need to change. Oh, we didn't know that. Oh, we are absolutely, thank you. That reinforces what our own research is showing. We need to double down on that, on our own with organizations and minds like you. So these are some of the big themes in this year's report. I'll make sure you get the URL to share with your audience and listeners and viewers.
Yes, thank you. Please do also share. We'll put all those links in the show notes below, but just walk us through all the links of where people can find you or where they can find you online, where are they present that they can follow you.
Um, I am very easily, you can find me very easily on LinkedIn. It is a blurry place of my professional, presence interwoven with what guides me and what I care about. And you can find some good interviews there, as well as on YouTube. I will share that as well. And then some of my extracurricular or outside of the professional time documents are on Instagram, where I have two presences, one devoted to my cycling passion, and the other one more sort of like a travelogue. Sometimes finding the moments when I was like, at some point, all I did was document and find those special moments and wanted to become a photographer, and I moved on, but capturing that moment is still a wonderful thing. So Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and then again for the cyclists, you're more than happy to follow me on Strava.
Wonderful. Thank you again for sharing your journey, for sharing your own personal inner design techniques in a lot of ways that you shared with us through your story and your journey here. And again, I'll share all of the links that you can reach Thomas in the show notes below. Thank you again, Thomas, for coming here on Inner Design.
Thank you. That was fun. Always good to see you.